Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Lieutenant Stephen Rogers, and welcome to Tonight in Canada. Folks, we have a lot to talk about tonight, but I will share with you in a few short minutes that there is a political firestorm over the United States of America this evening. Every news agency is reporting something that occurred today that maybe many of you in Canada and around the world are unaware of. Maybe you are aware of it, but I'm going to talk to you a little bit about this in a few minutes. I'll also be talking with the crackpot farmer, Tyler. Remember him? Well, he's going to be joining us shortly. We're going to be talking about what's going on in the farming community across Canada, United States, and especially in the Netherlands. We're watching what's going on in the Netherlands very closely, and we're warning United States farmers who are watching, who are listening, to understand that you need to step up and you need to help to protect the Canadian farmers, because that's where this battle line is going to be drawn at the U.S.-Canadian border. You need to step up and help them out, because I've got to tell you, the bad guys that are coming for the farmers in the Netherlands, the bad guys that are coming for the farmers in Canada will be soon at your farm in the United States if you don't stand up and speak out against what is occurring to your fellow farmers around the world. Also, the U.S. is seriously talking about sanctions against and penalties against the Canadian government over Bill C-11 and C-36. We'll try to get to that. And also, we'll try to get to a Project Maple Leaf update, which is going to be concluded. The report's going to be concluded at the end of this month. And then Alan Nicholson will be joining us. He's got some interesting information he'll share with you regarding the criminal charges that will be brought against certain people at The Hague. And he might even mention some names tonight. What do you think of that, folks? So all this we're going to be talking about in a few minutes. But first, before we get to the crackpot farmer, what is happening here in the United States with regard to one of the worst deals, one of the worst foreign policy deals any president in my recent time involved in politics and as an American citizen has ever made? Well, the Biden administration decided to make a trade regarding a woman who is a basketball player named Brittney Griner. They swapped her. They traded her for who? For a Russian arms dealer named Viktor Bout. Now, let me tell you a little bit about Viktor Bout. Viktor Bout, for quite some time, was wanted not only by the United States government, but wanted by several countries. He is known as the Merchant of Death. He is responsible for arming enemies of the United States of America, enemies of any free country, arming enemies like Iran, arming enemies, folks, like the terrorists, the cartel that we're facing in Mexico, arming every single imaginable bad actor on the planet. He has been involved in arms dealing for quite some time. He was taken into custody several years ago by the United States government. He remained in prison. And what does Joe Biden do? Joe Biden decides to release a basketball player. Why? Because she was popular. That's why. Why? Because all along the Twitter world and other different types of social media platforms, the far left, those who love the woke agenda, those who claim racism as a basis for her release, and on and on and on, all the garbage, if you will. All right, he decides that she should be released. But to add insult to injury, there are Americans, including a United States Marine, still in a Russian prison. Now, I know there's some questions about some of the backgrounds of the Marine and others. That has nothing to do with what has occurred here. The fact of the matter is that Brittney Griner, if you don't know, folks, was arrested in Russia on drug charges, found guilty in Russia on drug charges. Now, whether we like what happened with regard to those charges or not, that's not our country. Maybe Brittney failed to understand that in Russia, if you commit a crime, you're going to do time, unlike the United States, where if you commit a crime, well, you're going to be released to commit the crime again. But here's the irony of all this. If Brittney was arrested in the United States, she would be released, and who knows, maybe she would reform herself, maybe she'd learn a lesson. But Brittney, for those of you who don't know, in Canada, around the world, actually was kneeling at our national anthem being played at sports events, turned her back, from what I understand, on the American flag when it was being flown, and basically spit. And I'm using this metaphorically. I don't know if she did it or not, but I'm using it just to emphasize what I believe the thing she was doing is equal to, but spit at the American people, spit at the American flag. Oh, yeah, those who are watching now, who are far lefties, are saying, well, Lieutenant, she was supporting Black Lives Matter. Yeah, Marxist group, okay? She was supporting those things she believes in. She was supporting nothing. Why is it that she did these things against her country and yet was receiving thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars in salaries, U.S. currency? Why? If you hated this country so much, you know what? You should have stayed in Russia. Stay there. But you see, you found out that the Russian government does not tolerate those things. They don't have freedom of speech like we do. Of course, your supporters are saying, well, you're right, Lieutenant. She exercised her free speech here. Yeah, she did. But, because it's a right doesn't make it the right thing to do. What a disgrace. What an absolute disgrace. So Joe Biden takes the disgrace and he swaps her for an arms dealer, an enemy. I mean, a real ruthless enemy. He isn't called a merchant of death for nothing. And then tonight I see some of Biden supporters on TV, on some of these news channels defending what was done. Folks, it's just so hard to believe what's happened to the United States under the Obama-Biden administration. Incredible. But all this is going to change. They know it. It's going to change beginning January 3rd. But to see this happen, to see a Marine and other Americans left behind, well, probably shouldn't surprise us. Weren't Americans and soldiers and Marines left behind in Afghanistan? How about that, folks? Didn't we see Obama send a paddle, some sort of boxes full of cash to Iran in the middle of the night, pallets full of cash to Iran? I mean, so Biden, Obama, I long for the day. I really do, folks. I long for the day when their houses are raided by the FBI, when their offices are raided by the FBI. Now, that's not going to happen until the offices of the FBI are raided by hopefully a whole new law enforcement agency that will be created that has some guts and courage to put these people behind bars where they belong. They have betrayed America. Biden has, Obama has, the left has, and everybody who can vote Democrat in this country, in my view, you're helping facilitate policies that are betraying our very country. So there you have it, folks, in Canada and around the world. That's what's happening in America tonight. And I got to tell you, the backlash is coming very, very strong. But what's happening in Canada? What's happening in the Netherlands? Well, these are the things that we need to know, not only in Canada and America, but we need to know in order to put up the proper defenses against these weapons of war. And I believe they are weapons of war, a new kind of war, an economic war, if you will. An economic war, seizing our properties, etc. So, folks, we happen to have a newscast from Sky News. We're going to play that, and then we're going to have the Crackpot Farmer come on. Now, I want you to see this newscast. So it'll give you some flavor as to what's going on in the Netherlands. And I was pleasantly surprised that the host actually called out the WEF. We don't see that happening, right, folks? But here you go. It's about 11 minutes long. Sit back, watch this, and then we're going to have Tyler, the Crackpot Farmer, on.
Well, as we discussed last week tomorrow night, thank you, Rita. Last week in the Netherlands, Klaus Schwab's golden pin-up boy, Prime Minister Mark Rutte, is busy fulfilling the agenda of the World Economic Forum's Great Reset by turfing farmers off their own land because bureaucrats deem there's too much nitrogen in the soil. Ooh, this is the Great Reset that I've been warning you about for months, if not years, on this show. My thanks to Rebel News for these clips.
In the existing Next-Gen EU fund, there is still a lot of money, which is also partly funneled towards greening our economies, and that's exactly what we need to do to become less gas and oil dependent.
Where do you find still such a prime minister in the world? You find it in the Netherlands, and it's Mark Rutte.
If they're going to do everything that they want, if they want to go to the goal, they're going to reduce 50% of the farmers here in Holland.
Sure.
And that's only the farming, but the truck drivers is going to come down, industry is come down, mechanics is going to come down. Everything is going down.
At the same time, people are aware that the climate is changing, and that we need to step up our collective efforts to make sure that we counter that and that we mitigate it.
Disgraceful. Last week, I also mentioned the crazy climate policies in Sri Lanka, where the army are brought in to stop ordinary workers getting gasoline. And this morning, as I said, we learned that Sri Lankan President Gotabaya Rajapaksa has been forced to flee as protesters surround his residence. More madness caused entirely by the climate cult implementing climate change policies. No other reason. We're also now getting reports that Italian farmers are rising up to protest in Rome. Quote, they are saying, "We are not slaves, we are farmers. We cannot make ends meet." But it's not just Italian farmers. Polish farmers are now protesting. So too are Spanish farmers, as too are disgruntled German farmers. This is taking place everywhere, and you can slate it all home to insane globalist climate change policies. Indeed, Germany's largest landlord, wait for it, will be reducing heating for tenants in order to save energy, according to Reuters. I've lived in Germany. It's bloody cold, I can tell you. This, as I say, is the Great Reset in action. In the Netherlands, the proposals include a map displaying areas where up to 95% reduction in nitrogen in the soil by 2030 is required, with entire regions facing 70% reduction targets. Joining us now from the Netherlands is Witse Sonnema, from the Netherlands Agriculture and Horticultural Organization. Witse, great to see you. How are you? Thanks for joining us.
I'm good, thank you. Good morning.
Now, explain to us, Witse, what is going on in Holland, why these insane policies, and why the farmers and the organization you represent are speaking up.
There's a broad sense of frustration, anger, even despair amongst farmers at the moment. And it's not about sustainability per se. We're amongst the most sustainable producers in the world, maybe the most sustainable producers. But as you've mentioned, there's a map now outlining nitrogen reduction targets of 50% nationally, 70 up to 95% in certain areas. And imagine if you're a fifth-generation farmer living on your land, making a living, being part of a local community, and you see a map saying there's basically no future. No future for farming, but also no future for the economic, social, cultural fabric of the countryside. Well, that's what happened here, and that leads to these kind of pictures of protests in the street.
James.
Tell us more about what exactly the rules are that are being enforced here, because from here it sounds to me like there's an insane war on food and food production that's happening here. What are you being told about why they want to do it, where you're supposed to go, and and how people are supposed to eat? Is the end plan here that everybody sells their land off cheap and then it's sold to developers or to big agricultural companies, or is there something else going on? And how does a supposedly center-right party like the VVD stand for this?
So I'm not going to give you a full history lesson, but since the Second World War, farmers in the Netherlands had a clear assignment, a clear mission, which is produce good food, make sure it's plentiful, make sure it's available always. And we've been massively successful at that. We've never had hunger again. We've never had empty supermarkets, even during COVID, even during the war in Ukraine now, with supply chains that have been taking a hit globally. In the Netherlands, we only spend about 8% of our income on food, which is both historically and internationally speaking extremely low. And it's fine if the mission changes, if you need us to do more than produce just good quality food. But it needs to be a realistic target. The current targets are a 50% reduction of nitrogen. We've already reduced nitrogen by 2/3 since the 1990s. So another reduction is possible. We've actually with our membership base, the farmers of the Netherlands put forth proposals showing that we can reduce further if that is what society asks. But a 50% reduction in 2030, that's in 7 years. It's simply unfeasible. And the protests you're seeing at the moment are, I believe, about more than just that. It's about a disconnect between, on the one hand, political ambitions, and on the other hand, real-world outcomes. It's about consumers asking for one thing and voters sometimes asking for a different thing. And as a farmer, you're an entrepreneur. It has to work out in the bottom line in the end.
Rita.
We've seen very little coverage of these protests in the Netherlands, but the vision is incredible. What is the response in the Netherlands itself? Are the people with you? Are they standing with the farmers? Or do they back these dramatic reductions?
So the current reduction plans have been announced exactly 1 month ago today, and the upheaval has been massive, but so has public support been. We're enjoying the full support of the public, and these protests, by and large, further increase that cement it. People understand that this is not just about the 50,000 farms we have in the Netherlands. It's also about those who, it's about the broader ecosystem. I've had the pleasure to work in Australian greenhouse a long time ago, picking cucumbers, and the greenhouse was actually built by the Dutch. This sort of technology, we're shipping it all over the world because we have a strong primary sector, because we have farmers here. And people understand that. It's about, as I said, the economic, the social, the cultural fabric of the countryside, of the rural Netherlands. So yes, we are enjoying massive public support. This hasn't translated yet to a changed political course, unfortunately.
Wietse, tell us about the misinformation that's going on regarding what is happening in Holland, in the Netherlands. And, you know, following on from what Rita's saying about the coverage by the media, we're one of the very few shows. We've been talking about what's been happening in Holland here on this show, but you won't hear it mentioned anywhere else. I suspect that's true in many other countries around the world. Is there misinformation taking place in the Netherlands?
I wouldn't call it misinformation. No, there's a massive amount of attention to the trouble we're facing as a farming community and as the countryside in the broader sense. So there's always certain perspectives on the news, and some of them line up with reality better than others. And I do appreciate getting the time in your morning show to highlight the issues we're facing, because this is, in the end, a broader discussion about how can we tackle certain questions that society may or may not ask, and at the same time do it in a way that's actually realistic, that will lead to the cost being spread, because nothing is free. If you raise the bar on certain things, the bill cannot be paid by farmers themselves. If you're, say, an average farmer, as far as you can call an average, but say you're a dairy farmer, you have 100 cows, your income will be, for at least 100 hours of work, around the 30,000 euro mark. If you have to reduce by 50%, it's got to be negative 100,000. You're done in a year.
James.
Very quickly, I've heard that, how have the police been responding to the protests? I read overnight that a 16-year-old boy in a tractor was shot at by police and arrested and held in jail for driving a tractor at one of these protests. What is the police response, and how heavy-handed is it?
So we've all been shocked by the images of the police officer who discharged a firearm at, indeed, a 16-year-old in a tractor. The Dutch police are not known for firing at protesters, not at all. In the general sense, there has been a focus on de-escalation. At the same time, as I said, our farmers are frustrated, they're angry, they're despairing. And we do fear that this situation will continue this way and that more accidents may happen. It was a very close call. Luckily, nobody got physically hurt, but yes, we were all shocked. So I think it's important for the government to see the upheaval their plans have caused, not just among farmers, but in the broader community with massive support by the general public. Recognize that something needs to be changed.
Wietse Soenema, thanks so much for coming here on Outsiders. Good luck there in the Netherlands. We'll be keeping a close eye on it. This is what happens, folks, with climate change policies. People thrown off their own farms that they've been farming for generations. It is an absolute disgrace. Wietse Soenema, thanks so much for joining. Well, as we discussed last week tomorrow night, thank you.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I didn't know. It's the first time hearing of a 16-year-old being shot at by police. I'm going to welcome Tyler, the crackpot farmer, on. Tyler, how you doing?
I'm doing well, and yourself?
Well, I got to tell you, I know you've been following this closely and you've been speaking to people in the Netherlands, but I'm troubled about a few things. One, and I'm going to throw it to you in a minute. I wonder how the Netherlands, the government I'm talking about, is going to get the communist Chinese to change their attitude towards climates, because they're involved in all sorts of building nuclear weapons, doing everything they can to destroy the free world, including the government of Netherlands, ironically, right? So they're contributing to whatever they believe that they are being, they're contributing to regarding climate change, which I don't believe in any of that. And I'll qualify that in a minute. Secondly, with regard to climate change, I've always asked a question, Tyler. I remember reading a story many years ago. I didn't read the story many years ago. It was too far in the past. It was in biblical times, but I read about Noah and the ark. And there was this massive flood that covered the earth, and there were no factories around. There was nothing going on regarding things that could change the climate. Same thing with the Arctic and all this melting. So I think we have a lot of people out there going down a rabbit's hole, if you will. I believe there are things that only God can control, and climate's part of it. But what I see a common thread here, and it's maybe good, maybe not good. I see a common thread with the way the Canadian people respond and the way that this gentleman talked. I mean, so calm, so diplomatic, so nice. And I could imagine that when we start seeing the protest in the Netherlands and this kid in a tractor, it was as nice and calm as can be. And some lunatic, some crazy cop, and see, I could say that, you see, because I was a cop and I don't hold anything back. I'm not as calm, I guess, as some of other people are. He takes a shot at a 16-year-old unarmed kid. I mean, what's going on here? So, Tyler, you're up on the front lines of this. So would you respond to this video you just saw, and then give us maybe a little bit more information as to what you know?
Okay, so for those of you who don't know, I'm Tyler, the crackpot farmer. My basis, I guess, my following when I was in the protests in Ottawa. So that's my qualification for talking about this kind of thing. I want to talk about that clip first. They're talking about when the 16-year-old was shot at. That clip is months old. That happened quite a while ago. If I remember correctly, I was working on getting my combine ready to go when I saw that, which places that in like August, September, I think. So that's old news. I mean, it's still relevant, still pertinent, but that is old news. What we're seeing in the Netherlands, I think, is going to be very similar to what happened in Ottawa. You have a peaceful uprising of people who are standing against the government. We got to start peacefully. That's the first and easiest way to do it. But it's eventually it may escalate. We don't want it to escalate. But what we're seeing happen around the globe is we're seeing this constant push by government officials, either using invalid or valid data to try to push an agenda. And the World Economic Forum and Agenda 2030, those aren't conspiracy theories anymore. That's all real. That's actually what's happening. But what we're seeing is governments using things that actually have legitimacy, like with the fertilizer, for example. I've talked about this quite a bit on my page. The whole reason for the nitrogen fertilizer reduction is legit to a point. There is maybe misuse and abuse and over application of that. And so the government is using that just like they did with the pandemic the past couple of years. There's enough valid information there that both sides of the argument have enough facts to stand on and be right. And then from that, you can create division, you can isolate people, you can separate them, and you can raise those two sides up against each other. And so what we're seeing happen all across the globe in many different ways, we have, with the farmers in the Netherlands, we had things with the pandemic. Then there's probably going to be others start to show up soon. We're just dividing the people against each other, and with just enough fact and basis in the climate ideology, just barely enough fact that the people arguing for it have just enough of a leg to stand on to be able to group a following and to be able to push through with it.
Well, you're right. It's probably old news to a lot of people that are aware of what's going on in the Netherlands. But I'm looking at another feed here. Americans are shocked, stunned. To begin with, that there's something going on in the Netherlands. I mean, that's how far away we are from this. Like, I remember when we got involved with the Freedom Convoy, Americans were stunned that this stuff was going on in our northern border. And now I can see they're stunned all over again, what's going on in the Netherlands. And this is why, thank the good Lord for people like you and others who are coming on broadcast, at least that are feeding not only the Canadian people with information, but with Americans. But I've got to tell you, you're right. There's always two sides to an argument. But what bothers me about the argument of those who are trying to push the climate change factor are the characters, the Schwabs, the Soroses, people we know, all right, that are involved with anti-freedom and, in my view, anti-American, anti-Canadian, anti-every value-based country on the face of the earth for power and for more money. And I think therein lies the problem. The people who are heading up the charge, who don't want to sit down and talk to you or me or anybody else. They just want to use their money and try to overwhelm us. But Tyler, I'm going to ask you to weigh in on this. I've said quite often, we outnumber them, meaning we in the free world outnumber all of those in power. And you said something very interesting, and I'm going to emphasize this, and I'm glad you said it. We need to do things peacefully within the framework of the law, and we will always do that. I know you will always do that, and other organizations. We're working hard trying to put a lid on a teapot that's ready to explode. It's exploded in Venezuela. It's exploding in, I believe, in Brazil a few weeks ago. It's beginning to really get out of hand. And this is how revolutions start. This is how people get hurt and get killed. I'm particularly concerned about here in America. I think 90% of us have weapons. We're well armed, and we should be well armed only for one thing: to hunt and to defend ourselves against bad actors, not to get involved in the business of creating armies or militias to fight the government. We can fight the government legally and within the framework of the law, but people need a wake-up call, and that's why I wanted you on tonight. As a Canadian, you're speaking to Americans too out here, and we need to wake up in this country. Now we find out that your government wants to limit free speech. They're jailing pastors. They want to put up the Berlin Wall, the 21st century Berlin Wall through C11. And now they're coming after not only the farmers in the Netherlands, but I understand they're coming after farmers in Canada. Is that true?
Coming after farmers in Canada at the moment, from my understanding, and I'm not omnipotent and I can't know and see everything. Things are kind of a bit of a lull at the moment here in Canada. Fertilizer prices have actually gone down a little bit. So there's kind of been a little bit of a pause standing in the attack on farmers up here at the moment. But I just want to back up a little bit and go and talk about the Netherlands just a little bit more, if you'll give me a minute.
Keep going.
So for those of you who don't follow my page, I actually have a friend that I met in Ottawa who's from Alberta, like myself. He was very politically involved here and was pivotal in getting our fantastic premier elected here recently. Anyhow, Jordan is my friend's name. He is currently on the ground in the Netherlands, and he's using my page to get out what's happening there. So he's been doing lives and videos and photos and interviews with people there to get the boots on the ground, short and concise story. And so we're learning a little bit more of what's happening there, because the mainstream media, of course, as one of the tools to divide people, is not covering what's happening there. And so, like you said, Mr. Rogers, we're trying to put a lid on a teapot that's ready to boil. And Jordan has told me many times that things are going to escalate there probably fairly soon. And not soon as in a couple of days, but things are building. More and more farmers are getting frustrated. And so something major is probably going to happen there soon. But Americans and Canadians, listen up. The people in the Netherlands are not armed. And I just had a conversation recently with someone from there. And up until very recently, they had no idea why us Canadians and Americans wanted to have our firearms. They thought it was silly. Why on earth would you need them? You don't need them except for hunting. That's it. And then within the past couple of months, they go, oh, that's why. Because these two countries, specifically yours, Mr. Rogers, those are some of the last safe houses in the world. Because as long as the average common citizen in your country is armed, it takes away a lot of the power of the government. And I'm not condoning going after and shooting the government, whatever. I'm not condoning that. But what I'm saying is the people still have power because they have a means with which to defend themselves. But you go to Europe, you go to the Netherlands, a lot of those places, they do not have that ability anymore. And so you Americans, Canadians, you need to be vigilant and be understanding that when your governments are trying to take away that, it's not for your safety. It's because eventually they may want to do something to you that you'd want to shoot them for. And so if they're playing the long game, it might take them a long time, but there's two countries left in the world, essentially, that everyone is watching. And if they can get these two countries to fall, they've got it made. But they have to get the firearms away from the common people first. So I'm going to go, sorry for a little bit of a tangent there, but that's really, really critically important. So going over to Netherlands quickly, there's like daily protests happening. There is a lot of farmers standing up and speaking out because the noose has been tightening slowly for a long time in many, many different ways, to my understanding. The emissions is one of the big things. They're going after nitrogen emissions. They're going after cow farts. And they've just been slowly making things more and more difficult and less profitable, and with more and more legal red tape hoops for them to jump through all the time, to the point that it's now no longer economically viable for some of the operations to exist. And there's many reasons for that. Of course, people have heard of the tri-city state, essentially turning the Netherlands into one giant city just because of its location. But the idea is to try to get the farmland out of the hands of the farmers by pretty much any means necessary to fulfill the globalist goals and whatnot. But you've probably heard about the frog analogy. You put a frog in water and you can slowly heat it up, and the frog will change its body temperature and tolerate it for so long. But after a certain point, it's not strong enough to get out. And that's what we're seeing happening in the Netherlands, is the noose has been slowly tightening over time in many, many different ways, to the point that the farm's no longer viable. And we're going to have that happen here, probably in America and in Canada. We're on the same path. We're just a few decades behind them. Things are a little bit different here, bigger country, a lot less people in an area, so a lot more difficult to enforce those kind of things here, because it's hard to justify them compared to the way that the Netherlands is structured. But we are eventually going to see those things happening here. What's happening over there in the Netherlands, Americans, pay attention. It's coming here. It might be years, but it's coming, and it's already happening. It just happens a little bit at a time, and you don't notice it. Okay, I'll get off my soapbox.
No, that's fine. Look, you're educating people. But here in America, I'm glad we finally began to turn things around through electing Republicans to our U.S. Congress. So we have the House of Representatives. I really believe we're going to get the presidency in 2024. Let's see what happens. The other good thing, Tyler, is when we talk about people being nonviolent, there is a reason, because being violent, nobody wins. People get hurt. We don't need that, and it's against the law. I mean, you don't go overthrowing a government by ways and means of using weapons, as long as the weapon is not a firearm or something like that. But I believe the weapon should be political weapons. For example, the strongest political weapon we have learned that we have in America is what? A weapon to elect to school boards conservatives, school boards Republicans. The state of Florida, for example, I use that example all the time. Governor Ron DeSantis backed Republicans across the state for school boards, not state offices or federal, but school boards. And every single school board member he backed across the state won. There's going to be a dramatic change in the educational objectives in the state of Florida. And hopefully the rest of the states will use that as a model. So there's a win, nonviolent within the framework of the Constitution. Yep. Regarding the issue of guns, yes, we have a Second Amendment. And there have been states, what we call blue states, Democrat states, have tried to curb and hinder the ability of the rights of people to bear arms. And the courts have ruled systematically in favor of the people. In fact, our first broadcast in January with our new program, This Week in North America, we're going to have an expert on the Second Amendment who's going to be joining us and explaining to the people how that works. So the courts have favored the people all the time. My concern is down the road is the reaction of police supervisors and the military, not necessarily the military. In this country, it's illegal. It's against the Constitution of the United States for the military to become involved in any civil disorders, any at all. A couple of presidents tried it. It didn't work very well for the presidents. But I'm concerned about police supervisors obeying orders that they know is in violation of the law. And that's something that is to be reckoned with as we move forward. We've seen that happen across the country. It seems like in other countries, we saw Hitler do it, and we saw Trudeau do it, and we saw President Xi do it. And if you notice, I put Trudeau in that gang of evil people because that's what they are. And I say it's evil, you know. I don't like to call people names. I don't do that quite often, but it's evil because the agenda that these people have is evil. They come out of the Chinese Communist Party playbook, for goodness sakes. So, but you see, what's happening is they're inching away at taking the rights of people away, and we begin to see that. Now, look what's happening in China, for goodness sakes. You see, they use their military, they're using tanks, and I understand Trudeau, some time ago, he was thinking about that, talked about tanks in the streets. Could you imagine that? But getting back to the issue of, now I got off my soapbox like you did. It really gets to you, don't it? Though I mean, you really want, but you gotta be calm, folks. That's right. Gotta be calm. We're influencers on here. We're asking them to be calm, and our blood pressure's going up. But folks, as Tyler said, look, we have to be advocates of peacefully making change. We have the law on our side. But you know what? Somebody reminded me of this, Tyler. I'd like you to weigh in on this. They agree. We have the law on our side, and we've got a lot of people on our side. But as the Bible says, plenty is the harvest, but few are the farmers. In other words, we got a lot that we've got to do. But, I hear from people all the time, and we should do this, we should do that. Well, these people, look in the mirror, help us out, Go to local meetings, call your representatives. How about that?
Yes. I'm glad that you mentioned God, actually, because that's what I was going to bring up here. You and I know, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners know, that what we're dealing with here is not just a bunch of corrupt people. We are dealing with, as you will see referred to in the Bible, as the enemy. And it is a fight that we eventually win, but things, of course, gets really nasty first. And so the ultimate direction, the way of the things that we need to know how to do comes with a relationship from God. Because ultimately he has a plan. He's playing 12-dimensional chess. We don't only have the mental capacity to understand checkers. So we don't know entirely what's happening. We don't understand everything. But if you look at what happened here in Ottawa in January, February, God put that together. It was totally peaceful. It was substantially smaller than some of the media made it out to be. And it made a worldwide impact. They're doing things in the Netherlands right now because we inspired them to do that. And it happened all over the globe, and it was small. If God hadn't put it together and hadn't designed it to work that way in the way that it did, it wouldn't have made a global difference. But because he put it together, a group of, essentially, once we got there and we're there for a while, several thousand people with a few trucks and a few air horns sitting in a couple blocks of one city in all of Canada disrupted the entire world. Just wrap your head around that.
So, yeah. You're right, and I kind of, in a way, expressed that thought some time ago. Let's talk about that a little. The Freedom Convoy, if it never took place, we in America would never know what's going on in Canada. Mm-hmm. The Freedom Convoy, doing things peacefully within the framework of the law, really got the other side so upset that they were violating the law. They were acting like fools. And you're right, it captured the attention of the entire world. I'm glad you mentioned that. And I'm glad you mentioned who put it together. That's one part I didn't have that I missed. But you're right. You go right ahead.
Yeah. So God rarely ever uses the same thing twice. What happened to Moses when he tried to hit the rock with the stick 2.0? Didn't work out so well for him. So everybody who's hitting the convoy button again, like I think there's going to be a reunion in Ottawa in February. I don't really condone that. We need to work on our relationship with God as individuals. We need to be a shining light to the people around us in our communities, because ultimately God's the one who needs to tell us what we need to do. The people who came to Ottawa, a lot of them were not, spiritual believing people, but they followed their hearts, maybe didn't have the words to say that God led them to be there. And that's what we need to do, is we need to work on our relationship with God. We need to be receptive to what he wants us to do and go and do what he wants us to go and do, because we can do all the scheming that we want to do and all the planning that we as men and people think that we can do. And it can be grotesquely ineffective because we're working against powers and principalities that we don't understand. We need to be soldiers in God's army. We are not equipped to be generals. We're equipped to be foot soldiers, and we need to follow the leader of the general because he has a plan. He has a battle plan. He can equip us and give us the tools to take care of it. So what we need to do as our part is to get together with our community, with our families. We need to stop the division, stop being so isolated and so separated. We need to get back together as families, as communities, and to start to work together again. Get back going to church. Even if you're not a church-going person, there's benefits to be had by hanging out with church-going people. That's where this is going to start and where this is going to continue, because on our own humanly strength, we're going to fight a losing fight until we lose. That's simply how it's going to be. This has to be fought under God's direction. There's simply no way about it.
Well, the scripture says, we're fighting against principalities and in high places, correct? On the issue, though, of the battle, you're right. Two things come to mind. Let's talk about the first thing real quick. Tyler, in the United States, and as well as in Canada, I have somewhat been critical of church pastors. They need to stand up. They need to stand up like our American pastors did in the 1700s against the King of England. They need to stand up and start speaking out. They don't have to jeopardize their tax status here in America, etc. But you look at a Pastor Arthur, a Tywin. I mean, great pastors in your country went to jail. I mean, for goodness sakes, for freedom and liberty. I just want to know, and I speak to the American pastors who are watching, where are you guys? Come on, where are you? I mean, I can't speak for the Canadians. You could, but don't you think it's time you stand up? And Tyler, you brought up something very clearly, because a pastor once said to me, and this is a true story, I've said it once before, can we do anything? Anything, Lieutenant, anything. When I was an elected official, they called me a commissioner, a city councilman. Is there anything we could do for you? I said, there are two things you can do. One, pray for me. But secondly, when you're in the churches behind your pulpits, because you talk to more people in a day of worship than I as a political leader will ever in a long time, would you talk about sin? Will you really get people uneasy where they're squirming around in the pew? Will you talk about that? Because once you begin to preach sermons about the sinful nature of man, you're helping me as a government leader. And you know what the response was? One pastor got up and said, well, Commissioner, if we do that, they're going to leave the church. You see, therein lies part of the problem. So let them leave. You see, I've learned the Holy Spirit will lead people to the church. So to any church leader listening to this broadcast or watching, maybe you need to stand up. So let's talk about that part. What do you think about that part before I get to the other part?
Absolutely. You're totally right. Something that we've been working on in our church quite a bit, and I'm very, very blessed. Our pastor is an incredibly outspoken, has a very, very strong backbone. He knows where he stands, and he is not afraid to call an apple. And if the person in the congregation doesn't like it and walks out, that's their fault. It's not his. He says what God wants him to say, whether the people like it or not. And what we've been working on in the church the past couple of years is, one, getting our thoughts under control and being better Christians, but also the difference in between religion and relationship. And so a lot of, I'm going to be on my soapbox here for a minute, so just hold your horses. The difference in between religion and relationship, the way a church is supposed to be, is where broken people come in, the church helps them identify their problems, get past their problems, and equip those people to go out and to work with other people to help them overcome their problems. And how you do that is through a relationship with God. He's supposed to be your friend. He's supposed to be, like a parent, that he disciplines you when you do something wrong. He shows you how, he corrects you because he wants you to succeed. He has a plan for your life. It's not religion where you've got to do this in exchange for salvation or whatever, and you come to church because you come to church. That's not it. Religion isn't going to get you anywhere, but a relationship with God is going to. And a relationship with God is the kind of thing that sent Paul out and had him endure the hardships that he endured, because he had a relationship with his heavenly Father and so he wanted to do what he was asked to do. And if we have all these churches who are asleep, that are going along with things and they're just preaching the same old thing day after day, or they're looking at the demographics to try to get more people to come in the door or increase the tithe, That's not doing what a church is supposed to do. Church is supposed to equip the people to go out and to be a shining light to the community. And like I said, I'm very privileged to be a part of a church who is doing that. And yeah, you don't need to be a part of a church necessarily to do that. Some people might not have a church that's actually awake and following God in anywhere close to them. If you got a Bible, well, guess what? The best teacher is available to you, and that's God. You form a relationship with him. You don't necessarily need a pastor. You don't need necessarily a church. It is good to have people like-minded around you to hold you up and to hold you accountable to be a better person. You don't have to necessarily go to church. And honestly, I see in a lot of churches, their collection of some of the most asleep people are going to a lot of the modern churches, which is really sad. But so, yeah, in my opinion, we need pastors to step up, but we also need the individual people. Just like in Ottawa, change starts from the ground up. We can't count on our leaders necessarily, even our pastors in some instances. We can't count on them to do what we have to do, which is to change us, start at the bottom, and work our way up. So you got to work on you. You don't need your pastor to tell you exactly what you got to do or to hold you by the hand and lead you along. You can take care of you. I get off the soapbox again.
That's great. No, that's fine. As Alan Nicholson is preparing to come on, there's a scripture that says also that God knew us in the womb. All right, and it goes on to say that we were created for the time we're living now. And Tyler, I believe that everyone living now at this time, because I believe some prophecies are being fulfilled in our lifetime. We're beginning to see some end time prophecies, but I believe God created us for this time to do what we're doing. And everyone viewing, know this, you have a role to play here. Look, if you can't be physically active because you have a disability or something, the great thing, the most powerful thing you do is pray. You pray for us. I heard a pastor once say, Tyler, the tallest man and woman in the world are those on their knees praying, So don't think because maybe you can't help a church or an organization financially that you're not doing anything because you can't do it. Then pray. All right. Some people just can't do the things somebody else does. So I would say, Tyler, that would be a great help, wouldn't it, to give in prayer if you can't give in anything any other way.
Yep, I would definitely agree with that. Everybody has a part to play. Obviously, I guess I feel like a bit of a post turtle sometimes. I went to Ottawa as a nobody, and now I was a household name there for a little while. God obviously had a job for me to do, and I have to keep asking him and getting into prayer and finding out what it is that he wants me to do. He's given me the skill and ability to talk and to discern and try to see the truth in things. And so I've kind of sort of found my thing. I still have to try to work on every day. What do I need to do with this opportunity that I've been given? But every single person has that. No, I keep going back to the convoy, but everybody knows about it, and it has so many facets to it. It'll be hundreds of years before it's all unraveled. But every person who is picking garbage, every person who is hauling fuel, every person who is giving hugs to people, everybody had a purpose to be there. And when they fulfilled their purpose, the whole puzzle came together. So we just need to work on being our own individual puzzle piece. And for some people, that may be sitting in their house praying. For some people, that may be going out and getting into their community. For some people, it may be standing at the front lines of a protest. For some people, it may be sitting on their phone, making videos showing what's happening. You need to find out what your job is and go and do your job, whatever, however fancy or nice it is, or however, unfulfilling or small or demeaning it may seem. Everybody's got a job and a role to play, and we just need to do that role according to what God wants us to do. And that's how we're going to succeed. There was a comment I want to touch on earlier that was, I forget exactly the verse he was saying in Psalms, prepare for war. And so, yes, we start peacefully. We do as God asked us to do. We start this whole thing peacefully. But yes, God sent his people into battle. They killed people. Some of them died. It may happen. We need to wholeheartedly prepare ourselves that may be something that comes, but only once God ordains it and only once God says that that's something he wants us to do. But for the time being, we need to be peaceful. We need to press into him and find out what it is exactly he wants us to do.
And to prepare for that spiritual war. Let us never forget that, because it's a spiritual. Tyler, what a pleasure having you on. So we're going to have you back in January on our new broadcast. And if you could work on maybe some of your friends in the Netherlands, you're certainly welcome to be on our broadcast.
I've already got.
All right. What do you think of that? We're losing the connection at the end of your segment. So thanks so much, Tyler. God bless you. We'll see you again. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.
Thank you.
All right, folks. Alan Nicholson's going to be joining us in a minute. I see him here. So let's see. Alan, my friend, welcome.
Good evening. How are you, Lieutenant?
Good. Well, Alan, people are, always emailing me and asking me, how's it going with the Hague project, as they call it. So can you give us an update? And for our new viewers, because our viewership is growing daily, if you will, let them briefly know, what is this all about with the Hague and where are you now with it?
Okay. The Hague Inquiry is also known as the Fellowship for Freedom. It is available on the CanadianRightsWatch.com website, where you could go and sign a digital format, or you could print out a PDF form and go get signatures in front of a supermarket, Walmart's, wherever you see fit. Where we're at, signatures are coming in. We are not where we want to be. Fortunately, every time I'm on your show, we tend to get a lot more signatures, and then it dies down until I'm back on your show again. So,
well, Alan, give us your email or whatever the site is to get people to get the petition.
Yes, it's CanadianRightsWatch.com. That's the website to go to, where you could get all the information needed about the Hague Inquiry. I could tell you that we are finished the French version, because it's a bunch of Quebec people who have put the Hague Inquiry together. So the French version has been finalized, and it's in translation right now. There is another close to 6,000 pages in the addendum that's been produced, with more evidence and so on and so forth. And I will read something out, because I just want to make sure I get it right.
Sure, take your time. Take your time.
I also have an 8 o'clock Zoom for Unity with a bunch of great Canadians at 8 o'clock. So
is that tonight? That's tonight?
Yes, it's tonight.
You're gonna get moving, buddy.
So I'm gonna get. So the there's 13. I have them here. There's 13 pages of people who are accused in the Hague Inquiry, but the accusations are based on evidence gathered, and it's up to the courts to decide if they're guilty or not. That's not on me. So, and like I said, I'm just a spokesman. I'm not the creator of the Hague Inquiry. But there is quite a few big names on here, and if your viewers want to put in a few names, we'll play a little game. If you want to, I see some of the messages on the side here. So if there's somebody you feel that should be accused for doing wrong against the Canadian people or Indigenous people or the elderly, put it in the comments, and I'll tell you if yes or no they are on the list. But like I said, there's 13 pages of people who are accused, and I see yes, Justin Trudeau is on here. he's number one. So, but yes, Mr. Premier Ford is on there. Yes, Jason Kenney's on there. No, the Queen is not on there, but I'll bring that up to their attention.
Well, yeah, and it's a lot of work you did, and certainly have every right to bring allegations against anybody. And I'm glad you brought up the point. They're not guilty until the court says they're guilty, but you have the right. You have the right, as we do in this country, we have the right to bring forward allegations against our leaders. It takes a lot of courage what you all are doing. I believe you will be successful. But as you said, and as we said earlier, with Tyler Allen, people really need to step up.
Yes.
And fear. Let's talk about that for a minute because that's important. I have found in America and probably in any country, good, God-fearing, God-loving, freedom-loving people are fearful of getting involved. It's like the senior citizen fearful of calling the landlord, I have no heat, in fear that he's going to throw him or her out, right? That's what happens. Well, This is not going to happen. There's nothing to fear because what Alan is doing, what we're doing is within the framework of the law, correct?
Yes. Without a fire.
Yep. So fear comes from what, folks? The Chinese Communist Party playbook. Government's using it. I'll scare the living daylights out of people and immobilize them where they won't get involved. Get involved. There's strength in numbers. There's nothing wrong with that.
Exactly.
Well, I know you have an 8 o'clock meeting.
Well, I'm just going to say there is quite a bit of a lot of the comments that I'm seeing. I could confirm every single one that you guys have entered is on the list, except for the Queen.
Okay, and except for anyone you didn't see, you didn't catch, correct?
Yeah, exactly.
Because who knows? Somebody may be mad at their neighbor.
Exactly. So
no, listen, good for you, good for your wife. I know she's worked very hard. A good partner you have there, and we're so pleased to know you and an honor to be close friends with you. You're doing a great job.
Thank you very much. And yes, unity is power. And like I said, go to the CanadianRightsWatch.com website, and all the information you need is on there. On my Facebook page, you could follow me if you want any updates. You could send me a personal message. And I've also pinned the Hague Inquiry on my Facebook page. Take it and share it worldwide so everybody could see it.
Well, and we'll send it out in our next newsletter, this stuff. I know you got a great response from the last one we sent out. And
yes, we did.
All right, Alan. Well, good luck at the 8 o'clock meeting. You're about 1 minute late.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
God bless you, everyone, and God bless.
And that's CanadianRightsWatch.com.
Yes, CanadianRightsWatch.com.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Alan. Stand by, folks. Thank you, Alan. All right. Well, there you go. You want heroes. There's one right there. I know him and his wife and people like Tyler and others, and you all who are making all this possible are the heroes. Now, folks, I'm going to ask you to do a few things. Certainly keep us in prayer, okay? We're doing fine. We're moving along. We're expanding things. A couple of program notes. Next week we'll be on, and that'll be our last broadcast this year. We're going to give you an update on everything, where we've been, where we're going, etc. But the good news is beginning January, the first Thursday of January, which I believe it's the 5th, we're going to have our new broadcast called This Week in North America. We're merging both countries as far as a broadcast is concerned, and we're going to be talking about issues like we have been, but they're more focused on what's affecting both of us. And like I said, I believe the first week we're going to have a Second Amendment person on as far as the American side is, and then the next segment, there'll be two segments, an American segment, an American issue segment, and a Canadian issue segment. We're going to merge everything together. And I'll tell you what that's going to do. I've already heard comments about it from other people that may not be, let's say, maybe concerned about what we're doing. We're bringing the forces together. We're showing a unified effort from both countries, Canada and the United States. And believe me, folks, the whole world is watching. Believe me, there are people from various countries around this planet watching. They love what we're doing. I've heard from them, not hundreds, folks, a few here, a few there, but nonetheless, it's beginning to catch on globally. And I want to thank you all for making that happen. So as you move on, over the next week or so, there it is. I don't like to do that, but I did it last time, and thank you for responding. If you could help out, we can certainly use your contribution. There's the website, www.campaignforamerica.com. You go there tonight after the broadcast, $2, $1. Look at the amount should meet your budget, not ours, right? But you add that together, we're able to do things like we've been doing, like we've never expected to do. And we do pray. We pray that God touches the hearts of people to say, you know what, I'm going to be part of this fight. If I can't do this or do that, maybe I'll just send a few dollars for the cause. No one gets paid. No one gets paid here. We're working very, very hard. But we're getting things done to do what? To heighten public awareness, to bring countries together, and to work within the framework of the law, and to show the world that those in free countries like Canada and the United States, when we work within the framework of our laws, we win and the bad guys lose. Said that all along. All right, folks, so that's it. So it is Thursday night, and we're going to see you next Thursday night, and we'll talk about where we were, where we are, and where we're headed. And we're going to merge these broadcasts together so that this wonderful flag, this wonderful, beautiful flag here, you see that? Let's see if we could get there where the maple leaf is there. And this wonderful, beautiful flag here, together, we're going to lead the charge like we did for many, many decades, the charge to secure freedom and liberty for people not only here in North America, but around the world. And you know what? You're part of it. You are part of history. Thank you. God bless you all. God bless both of our countries. And I'll see you next week. And just have a great, great week. And know that everything is under control, right? Why? Not because of us, but because of he who sits in the heavens, Jesus Christ. Thank you. God bless you all. Have a great and wonderful week. I'm Lieutenant Stephen Rogers.